Hey, what's going on? My name's Brian Pickowicz.
And I'm Lindsey Rago.
And today we're talking about how to make hard decisions. So in our life, there's been multiple points where we've had to make a decision that changed the course of everything we were doing. Whether that was a decision to get business together, decision to get married, decision to adopt a dog. These are little life decisions, but oftentimes they are prerequisites for a bigger decision to come. And we recently made a massive life decision, one that was not easy, and one that was, quite frankly, really scary. And we want to talk about how to walk yourself through your own decision-making matrix so that you can figure out what you need to do and then own that decision.
Yep.
And so today, the decision that we made was after living away from our home for 6 years, traveling all throughout the country, being in different locations, and for the last 4 years really settling it down and having some roots here in Dallas, Texas, we made the decision to move back to our family. And we're going to walk you through some different principles, some different pieces that really helped us, because what we know is that making a decision can be challenging. Right? When you decide, even though the word decision means to cut off any other opportunities, you are being decisive. You are cutting off potential outcomes. You are cutting off potential relationships, and you are moving in one new direction. We want to talk about how we came to this decision and why we're doing it. And we also want to cue you into our life too, because we think of this as a way to build a relationship. We really like to share our life with people in hopes that it might help them be more inspired to do things in their life that might be challenging, might be scary, and might be hard.
Okay.
So from your perspective, Lindsey, before we talk about kind of our story and what led us here, what are some things that you think are important for people to consider when they're kind of listening to this?
Well, I think that the first thing to consider if you have a hard decision is really take a pause. Don't avoid it and don't rush through it. I think that we're going to walk you through some questions that you can ask yourself in that pause, but I think a lot of people will put off a decision for as long as they possibly can, and it really creates more pain for yourself when you do that, right? To be kind of stuck in that indecision, stuck in that in-between phase. And I know in our minds and hearts we might have been kind of stuck with that decision for maybe a year and a half. But when you know you have to make a decision, trying to give yourself a deadline, but then really give yourself that space to process the decision and what goes into it is really important. That's what we did. But maybe should we give some context on ours as well?
So a few years ago, almost 6 years ago, so it's getting closer and closer to that 7-8 year mark, we made the decision to leave from our home state of New Hampshire. Lindsey and I had grown up about 20 minutes apart. I grew up in a town of 750 people or so. Lindsey grew up in a town of about 3,000 to 5,000 people. We went to high school together. We started dating in college. And in that course of being in college and finding each other, and then I started bodybuilding, she started bodybuilding as well, we had this dream of moving to Los Angeles and really being in the fitness industry, being close to the people who were movers and shakers and really leading in the space. And we made that decision to go and do that. We took our life, we moved to Santa Monica, California, and we lived and breathed bodybuilding. We lived and breathed fitness. We were in the space around Arnold Schwarzenegger, seeing Arnold everyday training. We were in the space of all the influencers. We were learning from some of the best minds. As we were going through that process, though, we did have another decision that we had to make, which was, hey, bodybuilding's not really for us. Not really something that we see long term as a career pursuit, something that we wanted to do. Then we made the decision to change and really get focused on how to help people be healthy. What does it mean to be healthy? How do you change these habits? How do you rework your habits? And that required a whole shift in our habits in our life. But then we were blessed with an opportunity. And that opportunity was to come and live and work exclusively with a family in Dallas. So we moved in with them. He essentially, the client that I was working with, who was the head of the household, wanted someone to push him like Jesse Itzler had David Goggins push him. And I said, I can do it. So we leaped at that decision. We leaped at that opportunity. And we made it work. And as a result of that, we ended up moving to Dallas, Texas. We worked exclusively on and off with that family for about a year to 2 years. And then we started business together.
Yep.
And the fitness project emerged out of something that, hey, we were both working with one-on-one clients. Let's use our skills and our talents and our knowledge to really implement something that's going to be more fruitful from a how we can function together. It's going to be better for the client, and we can really create something special out of all of our tools, all of our knowledge, and really pull things together in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got here, though, we started to put down roots. We purchased our first house. We have really amazing friends. We have people that are like a second family.
Absolutely.
If anything, they're closer than some of the people that we're blood related to, just because of how much time we spend with them, and the things that we're able to do with them, and the memories we have, the positive energy that they bring into our life. So we've been living here, and this has become home in some sense, but there's also been this need to be home where we actually grew up. And that need comes down to my family more than anything else.
Yep.
The need comes down to my family. My family has a lot of health complications, a lot of health issues, and as my parents get older, even though they're still under 60, their health needs are really challenging for my brother, who is the only one home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's been this pull. There's been this pull for probably a year and a half, 2 years, as we've seen things changing, to be closer, to have that time, to make those memories. And the desire, right? So the need is to help people, need to help our loved ones, but the desire is also to be closer to Lindsey's family,
Mm-hmm.
who's in that area as well. So we have these two opposing forces, if you will: the love for your real family, the desire to be there, the desire to make memories, the desire to give back to them like they gave back to me when I was young. And there's a lot of other elements to being in New Hampshire that are positive, that are uplifting, but when you compare that to Texas, there's a lot of things that are great here too. And the comparison is, there's the people that we already love. There's a bigger fitness space, if you will. Texas has become the new hub of fitness, so that just means that we have people who are more like us, right? People who are athletes or trainers or coaches and are really pushing themselves in that area. And then there's an economic opportunity. We have a lot of momentum in our life, a lot of momentum in our business. Everything we do is online, but still that feeling of, hey, there's more going on here than there is back home. Doesn't mean that there's nothing going on back home, but there's that initial logic side of your brain, which is, hey, bigger economy here, there might be more opportunities, there might be more room for expansion and growth, especially as we hit momentum. And in this all, we've had to sit back and ask, what does life look like? What are we trying to accomplish? Where do we want to be? And I'll speak for myself, but the hardest thing for me was also that there was a lot of pain in going back home. And that's not a result of New Hampshire or the state, but when I first started to put myself out there and grow my business, there was a lot of people who treated me poorly, who I thought were friends who didn't turn out to be friends. And I think that I pushed myself so far in the opposite direction that I hadn't opened myself up in my heart to the people that really did treat me well. So all I had in my mind was this association with the pain, and not an association with what was really beautiful, which is a beautiful community. So many people that we love, so many people that love us. Like there's just a lot of roots there, a lot of great friendships, a lot of great people in our lives. But I was afraid. I was really afraid that all the progress that I had made, and this was an unconscious fear, this is something I had to really come to terms with, but all the progress I had made in the last 6 years would be lost because I would go back to some of maybe the familiar ties that I had before. Or growing up the way that I grew up and changing the way that I've changed, I might go back to something even that's more familiar to those old behaviors, mindsets, and ways.
I think a lot of people would resonate with that.
it was really painful to see that and then say, well, here's the path that I want. These are all the things that I want out of my life. These are the things that I'm going towards. It didn't seem at first like it was tied to this other decision, but in sorting out the decision the way that we're going to kind of lay it out, it became obvious and clear that this was the better route. This was the one that had more meaning, that led to less regret, that led to a more fulfilling life, and generally would be more positive. And I think I'll talk about the specifics of that, what that looked like in my world. But yeah, through that all, we decided to move home. We've decided to go back to New Hampshire. We've decided that this is where our path is taking us. This is where we're meant to be. This is where, in this season of life, we want to be. Mm-hmm. I think that's the difference. Like, you start to go with the I need to be there, and then you start to work to I want to be there. There's a reason for me to be there. Mm-hmm. There's a reason for this decision to make sense. And so there's really a few key points that we leaned into to not only rationally make the decision, but to own it.
Yeah, emotionally own it. To make a decision is one thing, but if you don't emotionally own the decision, or mentally and emotionally own the decision, then you almost get this feeling of remorse, where then that leads to going back on your own decision and maybe acting out of integrity or feeling insecure about what you're doing. So if you want to be in that place where you have confidence in your decisions, you can own your decisions, not just logically, but also emotionally, then here are a few things that you can ask yourself. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what we did. We had maybe even a more extensive process. I think it was like a 6 or 8 step process that required lots of conversation before, during, and after. However, we want to make it simple. Am I good to go there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first thing is really looking at, instead of like, what is the best decision? Because that is such a hard question to answer. You can't tell the future. Even if you have divine wisdom, it's still sometimes really hard to trust that. So the first question to ask yourself is, what's my desired outcome of my life, or just of the decision itself? Right? For us, we're moving, okay, we could move here or we could go there. Well, zooming out, what's our desired outcome? What do we want for our life? What would mean a lot to us to have in our lives? That was very helpful to start. If you don't have an outcome, you're going to be really stuck with pros and cons, and that's hard.
Well, and to dig into that, so for me, when we were sitting here, it seemed like the result was either to move to Frisco, Texas, which is about 30 minutes north of where we're currently living. So it's like, okay, we can move here, or we can move back to New Hampshire, right? So we'll move to this different location close to Dallas, or we'll move here. What's the desired outcome? And what was interesting, and this is where leaning in, it seemed like the desired outcome was either Texas or New Hampshire. Like, those are the two desired outcomes. Which one's better? And then when I dug in deeper, it was, what is the desired outcome of my life? Mm-hmm. What is the desired outcome of this chapter of life? What is the desired outcome of how I want to see myself? What is my purpose? And that changes the conversation from comparing these two spots and then saying, well, it really doesn't, matter that much, because if my life is about, leading a positive life that leaves a legacy of impact, that's full of meaning and full of joy, that I feel like I'm constantly growing and constantly able to give, well, it doesn't really matter where I am. Mm-hmm. If that's my outcome, which is what my outcome is, which is what our outcome was. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, we want to live a life where we're doing something that's meaningful, that helps people change, that leaves a legacy of positive impact on the planet and our community. Yeah. Okay. Well, can we do that in Texas? Yeah, we can. But if you do that in Texas, you also have to cut off the opportunity for you to have all these memorable experiences with your family, because you won't have them. Yeah. You just won't have them. Okay, but if we go to New Hampshire, you might not have the same we'll say, connections or economic opportunities as you have in Texas. And then the next question was, well, is that true? Right? Is that fear true? No, there's plenty of opportunities in New Hampshire. There's plenty of opportunities because of what we do and who we are. And I say that not as like a benchmark of our growth, but a benchmark of your growth too. Because sometimes what you are comparing, you sell yourself a story that one thing is this way and the other thing can't be that way. And it's usually not true. It's the way that we're seeing it. So being clear on the desired outcome of what you are really after. It's like, am I afraid to leave this relationship because there's not someone else out there for me that's going to bring me positive energy or love me? Or no, it's not true. Of course it's not. So then who do you want to be with? What kind of person do you want to be with? What kind of life do you want to have with your partner? Just as an example. So the first thing was getting clear on the desired outcome.
And second, building off of the desired outcome is basically what you just shared, which was, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? The only reason you can't make a decision is because you're afraid of something. Point blank. It's not because, I just don't know. It's because you're afraid of maybe making the wrong decision, but then you're afraid of what a wrong decision would mean or lead to. It's amazing how much clarity you can get just by understanding what you're actually afraid of and what the story is. I know when I was working on hiring a coach for myself, I really had to dig into that question. Really had to say, what am I so afraid of? Because there's no logic to me being unable to make this decision. There's no logic to me not being able to invest in myself. I really had to ask, what am I most afraid of? And I was most afraid of, once I got into it, getting to the end of my process with my coach and Brian thinking that I am the same exact person as when I started, and me feeling embarrassed and like I wasted my time, my energy, my money, only to disappoint Brian and myself, even if I felt like I changed. That was my biggest fear. So then with that clarity, I was able to think about that and say, well, what would I have to do to make sure that doesn't happen? Question number 3. What can I do to mitigate the downside? And we did that with this New Hampshire move as well. We thought through, okay, what are we afraid of? And what are you afraid of? Which you can share if you want.
Yeah, well, and I'm afraid of going back to who I was.
Right.
Like, I'm really afraid that all this momentum that I've built, all this progress that I've built, won't amount to anything. Or I might even be afraid, like if I'm breaking it down, it's like I might be afraid that I still have so much further to go. Right? And that was like, I'm going back with progress, with really great progress, but like I'm still, that target I set out to hit, I haven't hit yet. Like who I am today is not who I was planning on becoming at this point. Or I can see who I'm starting to become, that's not it yet. So it's like, if I just stay here a little bit longer, I'll make it, because I'm starting to make it. I'm starting to figure it out. I'm starting to push myself. I have all these relationships. I have all these things that are bringing me so much joy here. Why would I throw that away? And that's where being able to listen and say, okay, what am I actually afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that in your mind, like in my mind, I was afraid that to go in one direction meant that the other direction wouldn't exist anymore. So to mitigate against that, it's like, well, just come here. Like if I want to move to New Hampshire and be close to family and really take care of my parents, that's great. That gives me, that is meaningful. That is so meaningful. And that's very important for me. I want that. I know that it's also out of integrity for me to not do that. So I ask myself the question, if I don't do that, who will I become? Like, who would I have to be in order to withstand that amount of pain emotionally? I'd have to really lose my empathy. I'd have to change how I feel about people. And that doesn't sit well with me. So the mitigation, though, is, okay, well, if I do this, if I move to New Hampshire and I'm close to family and that's my way of approaching the future, then how could I mitigate against the downside of losing these current relationships? Or not necessarily having the same amount of experiences as I currently do, or the opportunities. Like in Dallas, there's 7.5 million people, so there's just a little more opportunity. Then that opportunity might just be you go to an event because it's closer, right? Or you can go to Austin where a lot of our friends live, or you can go and fly to California. It's only 5 hours away, right? It's just those different things that are possibilities.
Right.
I was like, oh well, if that was what I was actually afraid of, well, could I take a yearly trip by myself? Could I make sure that the people that I'm surrounding myself with are incredibly positive? Could I start getting those people in my corner now? Could I just lean into my relationship with Lindsay? Right? Can I make this about us and not about everyone else? Can we work on our relationship? And that's one of the things that we did. Is like, hey, we are each other's nucleus. And this is us. And what else could I do to mitigate against the downside? Well, maybe there's an opportunity for me to learn more, for me to experience more. Maybe I need to change my mindset of how I'm thinking about this opportunity, because what I'm going back to isn't what I left. Right? So you start to mitigate against it by asking questions based off the fear. It's like, okay, if I'm afraid of this, what could I do to not experience that? Or what could I do if it did happen? Let's say I'm really struggling mentally because I'm just having a hard day or hard month or hard quarter. What could I do? Well, the internet is vast. Are there no online coaching programs? Are there no online resources? Can you not go back to school? There's just endless ways to look at the situation.
Right.
But when we start to think in a fixed mindset that this is it and this is all there is, then we get stuck.
And once you have that analysis starting to run, a fourth question that you can ask yourself is, who is in my corner, or who do I need to pull into my corner to, again, mitigate the downside and improve the likelihood of the upside or that desired outcome? And I'm curious who you imagined, or if it's just what you were saying right there, like lean into me, or versus like can go somewhere else.
Well, I think a big thing that, so just being very vulnerable and transparent, I talked to my brother a lot. I said, hey, here's what I'm afraid of. This is what I'm really afraid of. This is the hesitancy, and just being able to be vulnerable with someone, in having a trusted resource you can be vulnerable with, and at the same time, that trusted resource being able to listen, right? Because the best thing my brother did is he didn't really give me much feedback. It's what I needed at the time. And then I have a few other mentors. One of my other mentors was a really successful entrepreneur who moved all around, and then life happened. He ended up moving back home, and he had a successful business. He's like, just do it this way. Just think of it this way, X, Y, Z. And then I had another mentor who was like, hey, I'm having a hard time with this decision. And I kind of feel like, I haven't fully pushed myself, and I'm starting to push myself. What should I do? Hey, remember, who you are is what you're bringing back. It's none of the stuff. So finding pockets and then starting to pull in your friends, starting to pull in the people, starting to kind of feel, okay, who do I want to surround myself with? What kind of conversations am I having with those people? And you create a litmus test. If you start hanging around someone, this is obviously in this situation, but it's the same thing as if you were getting healthy. You're starting to get healthy, you made a decision to get healthy, desired outcomes, I want to change my quality of life. I'm afraid that my friends won't accept me. Well, how can I mitigate against that? I can start adding new people. I could talk to my friends, blah, 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 blah. And then you start talking to those people, and they're like, oh, why do you need to get healthy? Or, hey, you can have a cake, or you can have a couple beers. Like, just come out. Come have a good time. Come on. And then when you get there, they start pushing beer on you. They start pushing drinks on you. That's a litmus test to say, that person probably can be someone that I invite into my circle if I control the circumstances, but they're probably not going to be the person who I bring in this next chapter of life. And I think it's so important to be okay with that, because that's another decision, right? But if the decision that you want to make, or the outcome you want to make happen, is to change your life, and then there's a person in it who is conflicting with that, then the outcome, at some capacity, I mean, each individual is their own individual, so you decide that, but I think if the outcome is so important to you, then you decide to either reduce or eliminate the people who can't help you get to that outcome. Yeah. If we didn't have a clear outcome that we were chasing, that was clear and obvious and there for a reason, and if we didn't start to have the picture of who we were bringing into that circle, and here's the people that we want in our life, then that would have been incredibly challenging to lean into, knowing that, hey, we're only going back to pain. It's like, that's not true.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We're going back to so many beautiful things and so many beautiful experiences. And even now, like looking at the first month we're going to be home, we're going to have my mom come and live with us for a little bit so we can take better care of her. We're going to have Lindsay's family come and spend some time with us just so we can be family again. And that's a beautiful gift. The piece that I want to pin down is understanding, though, that it also, I feel like the best thing that we've also done is ask someone who's more than us, which is we've gone to a higher power, right? Getting closer with God, getting closer with your Creator, asking the bigger questions about, like, hey, what is really important in life? Or what is really important? It's just being able to kind of separate those pieces out. One of the things that I did is I asked myself, when I'm 85, what will I regret less? Better yet, when I'm 85, what will I regret more? So if I'm 85 and I'm looking back on my life, if I moved to New Hampshire, in my mind, currently how I'm thinking about the situation, will I regret whatever opportunities might have been here in Dallas or the relationships or whatever? It's like, okay, well, no, because I can be so successful anywhere, right? So I broke that belief. Like, that's not true. And there's so many opportunities, and life is abundant, and I can be so many other places than just one. Don't think in such a scarce way. So I really won't regret that. But if I stay in Texas and I don't go home to family, and I'm not there during these years, whatever that looks like, it could be 20 years, it could be 10 years, it could be tomorrow, because that's how life is. What will I regret more? It's like, yeah, I will regret missing out on all those opportunities. I will regret those memories, those lessons. I will regret how that makes my brother feel. I will regret the fact that I chose economics over family. Okay, so that's the right decision then. Let's do it.
And from there, you have to make a decision. I say that with a slight laugh because I think that analysis paralysis is productivity disguised, or it's, I guess, indecision disguised as productivity. Yes. And when you sit in indecision, going back to the beginning of the podcast, you create pain for yourself. You might tell yourself, oh, I just need more time to think about it. I just need more time to think about it. I just need more time to analyze it. I need more time to look at my options. And once you give yourself the space to really write out these questions, whether it takes a day, a week, a month, however long it takes, then you have everything you need. Now, make a decision. Doesn't mean you need to make a decision about the timeline or make a decision about where you're going to go or what you're going to do, but make a decision. And when you make your decision, you are cutting off other options. So be careful, but choose wisely. Make a decision. And then from there, you have to step up and own that decision. Trust that you have done the analysis. You have thought through it. You have considered the things you're afraid of, the downside, the upside, what you can do. Own the decision. Cut off other ideas. And then lean in to creating that ideal outcome. Lean in to think about, and I say think about, really meditate on all of the different things that you can do to make that decision an incredible one. You have no other option. And that is really how you can go through the process of making hard decisions.
So we hope this is helpful. We also appreciate your time and attention to let us share this part of our life with you. It's not necessarily something that we want praise for the sake of feeling like we're important. It's really understanding that this is a pivotal point in our journey. If you're here, we're really grateful for the time you've spent with us, and we hope that in sharing this might illuminate something for you. This might be helpful. This might bring something up. It might inspire you. Something good comes from it. But we hope that wherever you're at, you're taking care of yourself. You're in a beautiful space. If you're in Texas, we've loved you. We will always love you. If you're in New Hampshire, we're so excited to see you. We're so excited to be a part of the Granite State. And with this all, go out and conquer your day.
Cheers.
Cheers.